Hi guys. So today's presentation is about the basic introduction on grounded theory. Now in this video, I will introduce what grounded theory is, what are the different variants of grounded theory, and how grounded theory can be done or can be conducted. Now, the basic and most important interest, or what you can say, an interesting fact about grounded theory is that it is not a theory per se. Rather, it is a family of methodology. Therefore, we have to first keep this in our mind that when we are saying that we want to do a grounded theory, we are basically talking about a method. Whereas the whole theory in the study, the whole philosophy in the study could be something different. So when we are coming to the methodology part, then grounded theory is discussed rather than grounded theory as the whole conversation discussion in your article, which is using this approach. So to make this presentation a little bit interesting, I have given a brief background. I have used Hindi quotes, and also I have used some funny texts just to help you remember the content. For example, remembering the name of Glasser and Strauss, who are the two famous propounder of classical grounded theory. I have added a picture of this glass and a straw so that you can remember that who is Glasser and who is the straw. Just to remember that Glasser and straw are the propounder of grounded theory, and I have named them as Glasser's Chacha and Strauss Mama. I hope you will like my presentation. So let us begin. All right. So, as we say that necessity is the mother of invention, the similar aspect, similar stories rest in the case of Strauss and Glasser too. So, what happened? So, Strauss lost his mother and Glasser lost his father. And they were initially they were not known to each other, so they were working in a two different organization in two different university, and they were living distance apart. It's not like they started together. Later, it was later that they joined each other, and they published a book chapter called Discovery of Grounded Theory, and that became very popular, and then they continued their research on grounded theory. So what happened when Strauss lost his mother? He thought that, and his mother was on deathbed for long, and same for Glasser, his father was on deathbed for long. So they realized that not many studies has been done to understand the belief systems, the last wishes, and to understand the problems pertaining to patients who are suffering from chronic diseases, their aspirations, their expectation from their life, their expectation from their peer groups, and so on. Therefore, they decided to do a qualitative research on the same. So this was an initial idea. Later, when they came together, they found that prior qualitative research are not very rigorous and does not provide a detailed description of how data is collected, how it is analyzed, and it was more of a objective in nature, more focused on frequency and all rather than the interpretation, actual interpretation and theory building. Therefore, they proposes the grounded theory. Now, although grounded theory was proposed in 1967 through this book chapter called Discovery of Grounded Theory, but the initial discussion on grounded theory happened in 1965 itself. In fact, even before that, 1963 itself. So few articles, research papers were published. In 1967, finally, the book chapter in a they contributed, these two contributed for a book chapter that became very popular, Discovery of Grounded Theory. So if you really want to refer to the classical grounded theory content, you must refer to 1967 work of Grasser and Strauss. Here it is another thing that is important is that Strauss and Glasser were not the only two people who were involved in research on grounded theory initially. So the classical grounded theory also included Jane Quint, and they in fact wrote something, research work in 1963 or 65, but it didn't get that name and fame compared to what Discovery of Grounded Theory was attributed with, and even today, Discovery of Grounded Theory is heavily cited. So this is one of the seminal papers. If somebody asks you what is the seminal paper, which one is the seminal paper for grounded theory, and if you have to cite discovery of grounded theory would be the one. Though you can even cite 1965 paper, but that is not basically the work where grounded theory as such was proposed, but more of a qualitative research. Now later they found that Jane Quint had a very different philosophical standpoint, and Glasser and Strauss were having a different thought process. So Jane Quint moved away from these two researchers. Here, one more thing is important is that Glasser and Strauss both came from two different educational background. Educational, when I'm saying educational background, I'm basically focusing on the stream to which they were aligned with. For example, one of them was coming from the biology background. The second was moved from the sociology background. So this varied, experience of working in pure science and working in humanities actually helped them to develop grounded theory in a more comprehensive manner. Why? Because then the idea of both pure sciences as well as pure humanities aspects could be included. And this is very evident when you go through the grounded theory discussions. You will realize that it has component coming from pure sciences as well as from humanities. Now today there are three different variants of grounded theory which are very popular. Though there is one more variant of grounded theory called the interpretivist grounded theory. But these three are the most popular ones. So the first is classical grounded theory. The second one is Straussian grounded theory, and the third one is constructivist grounded theory. Now, what is classical grounded theory? Let me give you a brief idea about what it suggests and how it is different from Straussian grounded theory and constructivist grounded theory. Now, in classical grounded theory, which was proposed through discovery of grounded theory article, it suggests that when you go to the field for data collection, you are expected to have a tabula rasa. That is a very clear mind, nothing in your mind before you go to the field. So you should be unbiased, completely unbiased, and the data collection process should happen in a way where you don't have any framework, any model, or any theory in your mind, or even a literature review being done before going to the field. So they completely abandoned all these aspects, and they say that when you are going to the field, just go with an open mind, interact with few people, and then through that interaction develop your or fine tune your research questions. And then when your research questions are fine tuned, you collect more data rather than predefining your research question, predefining your sample. Nothing should be done. So this is one of the important component of classical grounded theory, and you must remember that. Then the second thing is that grounded theory talked about is that if x is equal to y, then y is equal to x. This is more like a pure science. If you go to the field and if your informant, say the people who are you are interviewing, if they say that x is equal to y, then for you x should always be equal to y. Grounded classical grounded theory that says that you cannot include as a researcher your own interpretation to what the informants are saying. You have to avoid as much as you can. So this is more like a very rigid and very strict, a very what we can say very narrowed way of looking at a reality. Then grounded theory, classical grounded theory talks about coding of the data. Now I will explain what coding of data is. So they say that there are two major stages involved. The first is substantive coding, the second is select coding. Now when you move to Straussian and constructivist grounded theory, these codings varies. I mean the only nomenclature as such varies. So in Straussian grounded theory it is open coding, axial coding, and aggregate coding. Then in constructivist grounded theory it is open coding, focus coding, and select or theoretical coding. I will explain what this coding is, but just for a brief idea, remember that all these are different nomenclature, but as such there are not much difference in terms of what they denotes. So somehow they are overlapping and very similar. So in coding process, not much change has been done over a period of time in the grounded theory literature, but some changes with respect to the interpretation of data can be easily visible. So classical grounded theory is considered as part of positivist approach. Now what is positivist approach? Positivist approach says that there is only one reality. So what you are seeing, what you are observing, what you can hear, what you can feel, that is the only reality. There is no other interpretation to that reality. Straussian and constructivist grounded theory says that no, that is not possible. Straussian grounded theory that okay, that is a reality, but there are also one or two more realities that you should account for. Whereas constructivist grounded theory says that no, reality is not created as in this manner. In fact, reality is socially constructed. So what you observe is not exactly what is reality. This is like just like Drishyam movie. Deception. Visibles are deceptive often. So what you see doesn't mean that is reality. There are many interpretations to the same reality, and so when you are explaining some reality, you have to take into account the social, economic, political, cultural, and other aspects. So to give you an example, if somebody looks like a boy or a girl, doesn't mean that person is a boy or girl. Maybe that person's sex is a male or female, but gender might be something different. That person might recognize him or herself as a boy, as a girl, as a bisexual, as a gay. You never know. So we have complete autonomy, complete freedom in terms of interpretation of our gender, whereas the sex might be more of a more or less fixed. So classical grounded theory can be compared with the interpretation of sex, whereas constructivist grounded theory can be compared, and Straussian grounded theory can be compared with the interpretation of gender. So it's a socially constructed reality. This is what they said. There are other differences also. For example, Straussian grounded theory says कि ऐसा नहीं हो सकता. You cannot go to the field and you cannot expect that I should have a tabula rasa, a blank mind, a clear mind with no idea, and simply go to the field and start meeting people and collecting data. This doesn't happen in reality. We go to the field and we need some basic idea about what we are planning to capture and how. So this is that we should use theoretical sensitivity process or strategy. Now what is theoretical sensitivity strategy? It basically means that when you go to the field, before going you refer to some of the preliminary literature and preliminary idea about the categories that you will develop. So grounded theory का जो main agenda होता है, main purpose होता है, that is to create or develop a theory. And that is how, if somebody asks you why have you used grounded theory and not any other method, in that case this could be one of your justification that the purpose of your study was to develop a theory, to develop an emergent model rather than to test a model. And that is why grounded theory is very much suitable for your study. There could be other assumptions, other arguments as well, but this would be the main argument that I believe. So Straussian grounded theory says that when you go to the field, you also have to take into consideration the aspects of emotions, society, and so on. And therefore, some basic referring to literature will not do much harm. So they differed. Now why this Straussian grounded theory was developed? So basically Glasser was not ready with this idea. Glasser says that no, I believe in classical grounded theory. I'll stick to the fact that when you go to the field you should have a tabula rasa. Though later a lot of research papers on Glasser came up and they say that no, Glasser never claimed like that, but Strauss made it very clear. Strauss said that look brother, I cannot rely on your idea of having a tabula rasa mind. When I go to the field, I definitely need to refer to some of the literature, because as a human being, I cannot have a unbiased, completely unbiased mindset. We as a human, we are social animals, and there would be some other biases involved. Also, we are not very much knowledgeable, so we need to get some idea about what we are trying to explore and how it would lead to further interpretation. So if you have an idea, then it is easier for a researcher to collect data in a more appropriate manner, and also to collect data from more suitable sample that we are looking for our categories. Now what is category, that you will get to know over in my next slides and so on. Now in the Straussian grounded theory, three stages of data coding has been explained. One is open, second is actual, and the third is aggregate coding. Similarly, in the constructivist grounded theory, it is open, focused, and selective or theoretical coding. Now, in constructivist grounded theory, which was proposed by Charmas, so Charmas started working on this idea. Charmas was actually a student of Strauss, So she started working on this idea, and she wrote a lot of books in 1999, 1998, 7, 6, 2013, I guess even 2009 and or 13 or 12. So lot of her books on grounded theory were published, and especially in the sage research method you will find a lot of her work. So sage research method is basically a collection or series of qualitative and quantitative research that you may refer to. I'm not sure whether you will have access to, because but you may ask your institute to provide an access. And Charma's book is also available. So Charma's, she said that the reality is always socially constructed, so you have to take into account the the aspects, including the social aspect, cultural aspects, and so on. Therefore there cannot be one harsh strict reality. Reality has a multiple facet. And she also said that I agree with Straussian grounded theory rather than classical grounded theory, that we need to have a basic theoretical sensitivity to some extent before we go to the field and collect data. So so she agreed ki yes, my boss, my guide Strauss was right. It's just that I am adding it more to it by making it more humanistic, more towards the humanities rather than toward the pure science. As you can observe, from classical grounded theory to constructivist grounded theory, there has been a transition. Classical grounded theory was more like a pure science where x is equal to y is equal to x. In Straussian grounded theory, x is equal to y, but y is not equal to x. Whereas in constructivist grounded theory, x is equal to y is not equal to x, and x is also equal to z, x is also equal to w, x is equal to also equal to a, and so on. So there is a continuum. It is not a complete clear distinction between classical grounded theory, Straussian grounded theory, and constructivist grounded theory. So if somebody claims that classical grounded theory is completely different from Straussian and constructivist grounded theory, that is wrong. There is a continuum that you can observe, and this continuum took place over a period of time. This continuum occurred over a period of time. It started in 1967. Then in 1987, Strauss and Corbin published their qualitative analysis for social scientists, and finally in 2006 Charmas proposed the constructivist grounded theory. Later interpretive grounded theory was also proposed. Also in between, GUA method came up. So GUA et al paper, which was published first, GUA's paper first published with Corbin in 1993, and then in 1998 I think, or 1997, and again in 2000, early 2000, and finally in 2013. So a lot of transition can be observed in terms of the interpretation of grounded theory as a methodology. So such claims, you must be very cautious that when you are using a classical grounded theory or a Straussian grounded theory or constructivist grounded theory, you should be ready to defend why classical grounded theory is more suitable for your study and why not a Straussian or constructivist, or if you are using a constructivist grounded theory, why classical grounded theory is not suitable. To give you an example, so my research focuses on authenticity, the idea of authenticity in the field of sports. Now authenticity is not just an individual concept, an individual construct, but it is also developed based on your interpretation by others, which is the social aspect. So somehow my whole construct itself requires to be studied from a methodology that considers reality as socially constructed. I mean, the whole society, whole social aspect is creating your reality, shaping your reality. So classical grounded theory does not fits really well. That doesn't mean that I cannot use classical grounded theory, but constructivist grounded theory or Straussian grounded theory could be more appropriate for my research idea. So I use constructivist grounded theory in my study. But I have also used interpretivist approach. That is a different philosophical point. Now one more thing that I would like to share here before I end this for, our first session, and then there in the second session I will describe how to do a grounded theory. So classical grounded theory, as I said, is stick to positivist, or maybe the Straussian grounded theory is more towards the post-positivist aspects. Now what is post-positivist and positivist? As I said, positivist philosophy says that there is only one reality. Post-positivist is basically what happened next. So here also reality is somehow not reality is not experiencing much changes, whereas the constructivist grounded theory is basically your movement towards the interpretivist approach. So abhi you are at the constructivist grounded theory. At the constructivist grounded theory, you are saying that reality is socially constructed, but you still ensure some of the essential aspects of grounded theory, classical grounded theory, like you will go to the field with some referring of the data, not complete a reference to all the literature. Also, theory building is your main agenda, but when you move to the interpretivist approach, which is definitely a separate philosophical standpoints, then your whole interpretation of the data, whole interpretation of the analysis changes. So there is not just a transition in terms of the method, the way grounded theory is conducted in classical grounded theory or Strossion grounded theory and constructivist grounded theory, but there is also a transition in terms of the philosophical standpoints that have been used in classical grounded theory, in Straussian or in constructivist grounded theory. And you must be very conscious when you are explaining these methodologies, because you need to be aware about what positivist, what post-positivist or interpretivist methods are. For example, interpretivist methods includes narrative analysis, but nowadays even in grounded theory, interpretivist approach are being used. So somehow we can see that there is a convergence of different philosophical standpoints in contemporary times. Earlier they used to be very separate and very distinct. So now that distinction has been reduced to a great extent. I'll go back and quickly give you an idea. So Glasser and Strauss are the basically the propounder of grounded theory, and their main reason why they started this study was because they lost someone in their family, and that motivated them to study dying patients. And during that study, they realized that not a lot of research has been done in the qualitative research aspects, and therefore a more rigorous, comprehensive, a more rigorous method would help to do qualitative research in a better manner. And therefore they proposed the grounded theory that was called classical grounded theory in 1967. This was further modified, and Straussian grounded theory was proposed in 1987, and finally the constructivist grounded theory was proposed in 2006. Many of the content in this slide looks very different to you, because I have already I made this presentation for my students, those who are in the initial years of their research during their doctoral program. So I made them an FPM, this quote FPM kisi ke sage nahi hote, is basically where I'm trying to say that how Charmas started her own research and left Strauss, so just to make it more funny. So you may ignore those contents, but overall crux is I hope is very clear. In the next video I will explain how to do the grounded theory. So in the next video, conducting grounded theory will be explained to you in more detail.